we've been focusing on some real basic leadership stuff. And last time I taught, we talked about the wineskin and empowering structures. You guys remember that? And I'm just going to mention a couple things on that just to get you back into that phase. And then I want to move on to the next thing. And we talked about wineskin and wine. The purpose of the wineskin was to take care of the wine, and so it can be stored, and so it can be drank later. And we talked about empowering structures and how it's very easy to talk about empowering structures, but to really get down to it, it's a little bit more work than expected, especially when you throw people into that mix. And we talked a little bit about how can you still trust and love somebody when they're making all the wrong decisions. You guys remember that? And I shared a story of just a friend of my wife, a friend of ours, some major life decisions that she made. And so we just talked about that. The first key to any empowering structure is you have to learn to love people no matter what, even when you have to change their diapers all the time, and continue to lean in closer. And then the next big piece of the love factor is you have to learn how to trust people. You have to learn how to trust people, and that's a big deal. And so today, what I want to spend some time on is I want to spend some time on the culture of relationship. Relationship is something that you guys hear all the time here. It's something it's a word we throw around everywhere. You know, I'm sure the first day of school for you, your revival group pastor talked about it's all about relationship. And so anyway, so I want to talk a little bit about that and in the context of empowering structure and leadership. That sound good? Okay. I may have touched on this in bits and pieces in the last few months. I just want to really run through it as best as I can with the time I have. Let's see here. Randall Worley makes this statement. I'm just going to read it to you. All revelation grows in the soil of relationship. Otherwise, it is synthetic and not systemic. Another way to look at it, all revelation must work in relationship. Because of the position that I have in this environment, I'm exposed to, obviously you guys, but I'm exposed to people from this environment as far as Bethel, and I'm exposed to people from outside of this environment. One of the most common questions that I hear, and I think a lot of our team hears too, is I want to be sent and I want to be covered by Bethel. How do I do that? How many of you have asked that question at least once in the last year and a half since you've been here? A handful of you. And, I get emails from people that I've never met before. And they say, we're coming to Bethel for a week to visit, and I'd love to have a meeting with you. And I'll say, well, what do you want to meet about? And they'll say, we want to be sent and covered by Bethel. So that's what I thought. I hear it so many times. And it's a great, valid question. There's nothing wrong with that question. Absolutely nothing wrong with that question. But it forces me to ask, why is that such a major desire of people? And the reason I ask that, let me give you a quick backdrop on where I'm at, and that'll help you to understand why, when I hear this, why are you asking that? Okay. I cannot recall one time in my life where my mom and dad told me what to do with my life. Maybe once, and the only time I remember we were in a Mario Murillo meeting, and my dad and I, we were from, obviously in Weaverville. I was really young. I was a little boy. And we drove down to Reading. Mario was preaching. And in that service, my dad leaned over and he said, pay attention to him because you'll be in his shoes someday. That's the only thing I can remember that even hints at this is what you're going to do with your life. But other than that, there wasn't a whole lot of that. It was pretty much, there was none of that. And so it's like, okay, I don't know if that's normal for you or not normal. I don't know. I know it can be normal and not normal for people in this room, but that was normal for me. There was no like, son, this is what you're going to do. You're going to go to college, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. And, there was none of that for me. So the reason I bring that up is because in the context, I've never questioned whether I was covered or sent by mom and dad. There was never a lack of that, and you've heard this statement, the kingdom is designed on the concept of family. When you are in true, genuine relationship with people in your life, You don't need to ask to be sent or covered. Now, I'm being real careful here. Some of you that, now, if you've asked that question, I'm not saying that to make you feel bad or feel, I'm not saying that at all, but I wanted to try to look at it from just a pure logical standpoint. Listen, you never have to ask that question when you're in pure relationship. You just don't. You never find the disciples asking Jesus, can we go do this? Can we go do this? Will you send us here? Can you cover us? You don't find that. Why? Because they were in true, genuine relationship. And when you learn how to, you'll be amazed that God loves it when you have the ability to honor what he says to you in the context of who you're in relationship with. I'm telling you what, it may be slow. That's probably where a lot of people have a hard time. It's slow, really slow. And at times, it doesn't feel like it's going anywhere. Where you have this thing from the Lord. I mean, you've got this word of the Lord, this whatever, it could be a life-changing direction, or it could be this, just pure kingdom revelation. And you're like, okay, if I actually do what I just received, it's going to freak out my wife, my friend, my family, whatever. It's going to freak out the relationship I have. I'll tell you what, a lot of people, sometimes they avoid that process because it's too slow, or at first they get, the idea gets rejected. Are you guys with me? I mean, this is that process. And I'll tell you what, we have such a value for building slow. Building slow has endless results. The results, the fruit from building slow goes in an environment, in an age of time where everything's about speed, get it done now and let's move on. This sometimes jars, our operating systems are not used to this. The way we're wired, the way our structure, we're like, go slow. What does that mean? If I push the button, it's going to be in my house in 2 days. So I expect when I connect with you, everything's going to be worked out in 2 days. So we've been so wired this way because of our environment and culture. And in some way, Bethel drives people crazy on this one thing right here. I can't tell you how many, it would be wrong for me to tell you the stories because it would be very dishonoring and disrespectful to these individuals. But we've had people from all levels of society come into this environment and just get absolutely frustrated at how slow we are. And we do it on purpose, not to frustrate them, but we build slow on purpose. We build slow on purpose because we do not, because a lot of time going fast has a motive that we just don't want. Now, is it wrong to go fast? No. Now, some people say, you guys are going slow. It looks like you're going 5 million miles an hour. I know it looks that way, but just so you know, a lot of the stuff that we experience now started a long time ago. I mean, this is a slow process. So this whole thing of relationship freaks a lot of people out because it takes time. It takes time to build trust and relationship with somebody. But I'm telling you, if you can learn to slow that part of you down. Now, I understand there are certain things in the kingdom that have urgency and it must be done now. I understand that. I know there's exception to this. But largely, our operating system, this is how we operate. Largely, there are always exceptions, but largely, this is how we operate. And it's this thing of learning how to have such a high value for relationship. And I'll tell you why. I don't ever want to sabotage relationship for the sake of the call. And I'm going to tell you why. I've had people in my office over the last 5 years alone, just the last 5 years. I won't even go before that. They're in my office and they're burned out. They're exhausted. They're tired. They're just absolutely, they're at the end of their rope. They're done. And they're in my office. And as I dig and find out where they're at, sometimes, this is not every case, but it's a common thing I've noted. These individuals that sit in my office 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 30 years ago, they got something from the Lord and ran with it. They went instead of being sent. And so here they are 20, 15, 20, 30 years later, sitting in my office, and I've never met them before in my life. And here they are sitting in my office and they're looking for another line to sign their name on. We don't even have a line to sign a name on as far as being sent and covered. It doesn't exist. Now, there in some cases, from a legality reasons, we have that. But as far as does that line with a signature on it mean a lot to us? It's really just for legal reasons, to be honest with you. But as far as the relationship, the depth of relationship, that's non-existent. And so I have people in my office that I sit there and I listen to, and I realize, I wonder if this is what this is all about. Why this is such a big deal of learning how to build slow, how to learn how to take revelation from the Lord and work it out in the people, in the relationships around you. Because what I can see is when Jesus had his 12 disciples, when he called the 12 disciples and said, follow me, 3 years later, he looked at them again and said, all right, now go. Those 3 years were the most intense team building, family relationship experience anybody could ever have. We have taken that verse, go into all the world, and we've slapped it on every missions organization in the world. We've slapped it on every, it is, and I'm not speaking judgmentally, so just try to work with me here. We have used it as a verse to justify going into all the world. And should we? Yes, we should. But please understand that that statement was made in the context of what? Relationship. So instead of taking that verse out and saying, all right, I just go, understand that Jesus was addressing 12 men. Said, all right, now go. You know why they were so successful? Because they were in the incubator called relationship. But this is a really big deal. Let me read you something real quick here. As you begin to receive your inheritance and release it to the next generation, it is important that you learn how to carry your revelation from the Lord and honor the relationships you have. God is so moved by your ability to honor the relationships you have with him, as well as the people around you. When you begin to place a higher value on relationship than your duty, you will remove any potential to treat people in an inferior manner. You read that again. When you begin to place a higher value on relationship than your duty, you will remove any potential to treat people in an inferior manner. It will affect the way you share the good news with people. Instead of treating them like a target for the gospel, you will treat them the way a person should be treated. This does not just affect you. This affects how the gospel is actually preached. Because when you learn how to value the people that you live with every day, guess what happened when you rub shoulder with somebody you've never met before? You don't differentiate them from that's the world and this is my family. You actually approach them the same way you approach your family. And it affects everything. The way you preach the gospel, the way you live your life, the way you do everything drastically shifts. People are no longer, they're of the world. They're a target. They're a trophy. They're the trophy on my shelf. And so the way that you interact with them, and this is the whole thing of learning how to build bridges from your territory to someone else's territory. And so this whole thing is a really big deal, learning how to have a high value for a relationship more than your duty. Does it mean that you don't do your duty because of this? My favorite answer for that is Paul says, work it out. What do you think he meant when he said work out your salvation? Because when you said yes to him, it jumbled everything up big time. When you said yes to him, I don't know how to say this without, I'll just say it and see what happens. When we said yes to him, we have this idea everything is put in order. That's true, but sometimes that order doesn't make any sense to you. We think, okay, I'm going to say, yes, he's going to fix everything. And I'm just going to be, it's going to be just a real nice life from here on out. I'm telling you what, when you said yes to him, everything was put into order, but it may not be what you thought, how you thought, and what you expected. And so this whole thing of the Lord speaking to you and showing you things, giving you responsibility, giving you, Eric, I've called you to do this. Johnny, this is what you're supposed to do. And as you begin to get invaded with the kingdom of heaven and your responsibility with that, and then working that out in relationship. Are you guys with me? Yeah. I want to challenge you as you guys step out into leadership in greater ways. This isn't, for longevity purposes, for the ability to have something to give to the next generation. All that is a part of what we're talking about today. You don't want to hand off. You don't want to hand, one of the challenges we face, that's probably the right way to say it, in this environment is there are core values, there are key themes that we carry in this house. And those can be written down. They're written in books, they're on teaching CDs. They are incredible depth and amount of information of what this house represents. I mean, we have resources for everything that we say here. We've got, you pick and choose. You want that one phrase you heard someone say, guess what? We got a book about that one phrase. We have so many resources in this environment. So all that stuff, that's not what you want to hand off. Back up. That's not the only thing you want to hand off. You want to hand off the context of where that was made. We don't want to just hand off God is good. We want to hand off everything that helped us get to that, hand that off. And sometimes people, they think they can come in, they can listen, they can do this, read this, listen to this, and then they go off. And that's fine. But I'm telling you, with this group right here, with the people that have invested their life in this environment and paid a price to be here, you're not just here to get a bunch of information. You're not just here. Now, are you getting it? I think you all say yes. You're getting probably too much, sitting on your chairs every day, hours and hours and hours. But you're not here just to get information. You're here to get the foundation, the context, the culture, the relationship that took place and happened for you to hear that information. That's what you're here for. That's what you're here to get. And this is how you get it, is you have an incredible value for relationship. You have just an incredible value for that. One of the ways you can define, one of the ways that I believe you can define how to carry the tension of revelation from the Lord and, revelation from the Lord and the relationship, how to honor those two, is find out the grace that you have. Define the grace that you carry. The Lord will oftentimes, he will promise you something that you don't have a grace yet to do. Let me try this side. The Lord oftentimes will promise you something that you don't have a grace yet to do. Let me try the middle. It's good. Good. 8 years ago, I don't want to go into it's a long story and I don't need to tell you the long story, but 8 years ago, I had several encounters that just kind of put this new resolve in me. It kind of gave me substance, if you will, my own personal substance. And as a result of that encounter, my influence slowly began to grow. And so within our environment and outside of our environment, and then, on and on and on. And so I was feeling the pull, and it was like, man, this is what the Lord is releasing now. And so I was running with it. And as I was running with it, not really realizing the impact it was having on my family. Now, I'm a really quick learner. I don't need a lot. I don't need a big slap in the face to get my attention. When I hear a whisper, I make changes. I'm good at that. But I began to realize that I had a lot to learn in this area of what the Lord is putting in my life as far as my ministry on a local level and on an international level, of carrying that and, just running with that, but yet going, okay, I have to learn how to define this. And it affects, it affects how you set your life up. And there have been years, and I don't regret it. I do, because I wish I learned this a lot longer time ago. But there were years and seasons where I just got flat out too busy with what the Lord was giving to me. so much to the point that it was taking away from the relationships I had. Now, thankfully, it didn't take me years to figure it out. It took me a day. It took me an hour. I mean, honestly, that's how I'm just thankful for that. But what it takes is the relationship that gives you great feedback. Now, that sounds really nice, but when you're running with a passion, you're saying, the Lord has called me to this, and someone says the opposite, your ability to hear their feedback is really important. Your ability to not defend yourself, your ability to not pull the God card out. We love to do that one. We have this little card in our wallet and we say, oh yeah, well, God said this. Try refraining from that. It'll save you a lot of time. I guarantee it. But when you begin to get feedback because of this tension, because of this, learn how to just flat out listen. Because what that feedback is telling you that you've stepped out of the grace that you have. I know this is causing lots of questions. I can feel it. Now, am I talking about the 100 people in your life giving you feedback? No. I'm talking about the people that you would call your family, whether it's biologically or spiritually. That's your decision. But people that you consider your spiritual family, your fathers and mothers, when they begin to give you feedback, guess what they're doing? They're actually saying, hey, Eric, this is a grace that you have to do. This is the grace that's on your life to do that. But we hear it as we're doing something wrong. One of the top 5 strengths. One of my top 5 is self-assurance. I have no problem with self-assurance. I don't know if my kids are still here. My youngest daughter, she has an incredible amount of self-assurance. It makes her daddy proud. She goes to one practice for, basketball practice. And she comes home and she had, in her mind, she said, I could coach the team. I'm not exaggerating that she believes it with her heart. She's all, oh yeah, I could do it from here. I don't need any more help. And we have to remind her, honey, when you go to practice tonight, let the coach teach you. Don't tell the coach anything, just listen. We're teaching my daughter how to get some feedback. But that's one of my top 5 strengths is self-assurance. I have no problem confident. It's just something that's wired. It just, I'm just a confident guy. It's just something that I have. And I'm learning something that when someone gives me feedback in an area that I am very confident in, guess what I do? I get defensive. Because I hear that as you're not doing it right or you're failing at it. So when my wife gives me feedback in an area of my life that the Lord is putting on me, guess how I hear it? Used to hear it, I should say it that way. I heard it as I'm doing something wrong, and I hate failing. So when I hear that I'm doing something wrong, guess what? I'm failing. And I hate failing. I won't do things. If I know I'm going to fail, I won't even attempt it. Like people say, how come you don't dance? That's why. It is not, my physiology did not work with body movement. I can do the hop and that's just about it. My kid got the little dance Wii game for the Wii. And I'm doing it. I'm actually doing okay. Part of my body just don't move like they're supposed to. Anyway, all right, got off track. Coming back here. Just to let you know, for Valentine's Day several years ago, I bought a 7-week dance class for my wife and I to go to, ballroom, yeah. So I'm trying, I'm attempting, but I won't do it in front of nobody because of that thing of failing. So anyway, point being, but you see, when I got feedback, when I heard feedback, I took it as an insult. I took it as you're failing, you're messing up. And so I remember carrying this thing, this thing of the Lord, from the Lord, this revelation, this God, this and that. And then I'm running with it. And then I get feedback from my relationship, my wife, my friends, people that I would call my family. I was getting feedback. And boy, it would sink my ship like that. It would just sink my ship. And it took me a while to learn, you know what, when they're giving me that feedback, It's allowing me a chance to protect that connection. But it's also communicating to me, Eric, you're going beyond the grace that you have for this season in your life. So if you can learn in the context of relationship, if you can learn to receive feedback and listen to it through that lens, this is actually information for me to learn how to protect the relationship. And secondly, I'm going farther and faster than I have a grace to do. And so for my wife and I, what we do now, this is just as a result of this, what we do now is we sit down and we actually, now this may sound like a no-brainer to you, but this was actually a process for me, okay? This whole process, like, all right, I want to, if I want to be blessed and covered, if I want my family to be taken care of, but at the same time carry this thing over here, then the way we plan our year, the way we plan our trips, the way we plan our vacation, the way we plan our evening, the way we do all of that, is we do that together. It sounds like a no-brainer, but it took some time to figure that one out. We do this together. We're going to find out, okay, you know what? That's too many of this in a row. Because I know what that feels like when I go through a 2-month season where I'm just running 100 miles an hour. I go, you know what? I know what that feels like, and I don't want to do that again. And so we set up, we actually, honestly, we schedule at least 6 months, sometimes up to a year of what our travel, vacations, and all that. We schedule that out far enough, but it's based on like, okay, I learned what I have a grace to do, and then I superimpose it over what's coming up. Does that make sense? This is a big deal. And so some of you, you're single right now, and so there's a lot more freedom. You're like, I can go, you're right, you can. But I'm telling you, if you can just hear me out on this, if you can learn to implement this now, when you get married, tell you what, the learning curve, you won't have to worry about it because you'll learn, because you value relationships so much to the point that it helps to give you a sense of how to manage your life now, instead of burning the bridges along the way and having to repair them. Any questions?
All right. So the other week you were talking about don't develop a structure or a wineskin until there's wine, and that too many people try to build a structure for Holy Spirit to come into instead of building a structure, or instead of a flexible structure around what God is already doing. When Chris talks about structure, it seems to be for everything from macro to micro, like from national to personal, and to empower our strengths and cover our weaknesses. What are the differences between what you're talking about with structure and wineskin and Chris's teaching on structure and government? And more importantly, how do they flow together?
Okay, can you simplify Chris's question?
Simplify Chris?
Chris,
what you're saying? Okay. So basically,
no, the reason I'm asking, I want to make sure I understood what he said.
Yeah. When Chris talks about government and structure, it's empowering your strengths and covering your weaknesses. And it seems like it's usually through relationships around you. Mm-hmm. So I was just wondering, what are the differences when you're talking about structure, wineskin, things like that? What are the differences between what you're saying and what Chris is saying? And more importantly, what are the similarities and how they flow together?
I think Chris is talking a lot. Again, you're in some ways, I'm taking a shot of something that I heard possibly out of context. So I think Chris is talking a lot about external structure. Maybe for a government or, a certain environment. He's talking about an actual leadership structure that accomplishes certain things. I am talking about that, but I am probably more talking about the core values that help to create the structure. So it's almost like the ideas that you come from, the philosophy, theology, and the core values will help to create the structure that Chris is addressing. That's probably the way I can differentiate when we're both using similar words, but I'm more referring to this. And so I think I probably naturally spend more time on internal structure than external structure, but the internal structure is necessary in order to create an external structure. And so that I tend to spend more time on that. If you want to change a culture, create the one you want inside you first. So that's probably where I'm coming from. And Chris is lot, not that he's not focused on the internal, but he, in this environment in second year, he's talking a lot about the external. Actually, you know, he talked, I don't know if he's gotten into it yet, but a lot of it business experience and all the stories behind that as far as external structure. That makes sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
So everything you were just talking about taking what the grace that you have and make it into a time span and being able to set, you know, your relationships, like your vacations and everything. How do you do that if you don't know what the next year's expectations are of your life? So like an example of that is my fiance is in the Army, in the ROTC program. The Army is not that great at telling you what's going to happen next. So we can never plan out anything more than like maybe a month in advance.
Mhm.
How do you take a structure but being able to make it into a year when you have no idea
Yeah.
how to structure it?
Yeah, that's a unique situation. I mean, that's definitely a unique situation when you have that. So I probably don't have the greatest answer on that. Probably simply, you know, with the amount of information you have, which a month, and that's what you got to work with, honestly, because that is a very unique situation. You know, I can only schedule out of 6 months to a year because that's about as far. That's my 1 month. You know what I mean? So you have I don't want to say limitations. You have dynamics that are more confined than mine. I believe the principle is the same. I think it's important if that is your dynamic, make sure your dreams are still alive. I think with dynamics that, you know, that limiting, not the right word, you know what I'm trying to say, that with that reality you have, it would seem that your dreams, your hopes would just kind of be put on the back burner because you can't do anything about it. I don't think that's necessarily true. I believe you keep your dreams and your hopes, the stuff that God put in your heart, the stuff that keeps you alive. Keep that in the forefront and just don't and live with that in mind. And I think what people do, they tend to put that on the back shelf because my reality won't let me do it. You know, we're called to live by this, not by just our reality. That makes sense? Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Hi, sorry being how to word this, but last week you were talking a lot about changing diapers and the structures and when we don't, or when there's a structure in place, but then we constantly have to change diapers on people. Well, I work for an agency where I create, you could call it a structure of, I assess clients and then create what we call a care plan for the clients, to help the client with what our agency does.
Mhm.
And then I send staff to go and into their homes, because it's an in-home care agency, into the homes to basically carry out this care plan after they've been trained. And I guess I'm just asking, when you're constantly feeling like you're changing diapers and it has repercussions, like a lot of repercussions on the client, on the agency, things like that. What would your advice, what would you say about that as a leader in that agency? As what, I mean, because a lot of it also is that I see that that my staff's strengths are in other areas, but it's not their job description. So
Yeah, totally.
yeah, just what do you have to say about that?
Yeah. Have you been to somebody's house and they show you some home video of their kids doing something? Did anybody have that experience? You know, like they look at my son's first baseball game and you're like, this is the most boring thing I've ever seen in my life. But that mom and dad is like, this is the most exciting thing to them. You know, have you had that experience? Why? Because that mom and dad has invested their entire life in the life of that child. So any little thing that is victory or fun or they're learning to walk, mom and dad, they had poured so much energy into this being that any little thing that represents yay, they get so excited over it. So you need to find things that the baby's first walk, first step, they hit their first baseball and celebrate that. Because that right there overrides all the diaper changing you've ever done. I mean, I am in the funnest stage in life right now ever. I have not had that many bad seasons. My life is getting better and better. And right now, my wife and I, we have so much, one of the chief joys in life is raising our children. It is an absolute blast. But we are experiencing that now because of all the diaper changing, because of, all the late nights and all of that. And that, honestly, we make that, the Western culture puts such a bad deal on that, but really that's actually a lot of beauty in that. Some of my hardest nights with my kid where they would not go to sleep, I look back and I go, I'm so thankful I got to do that. And I wish I enjoyed it more then. And I did a pretty good job then, honestly. I wasn't very grumpy. I mean, there were moments where I am exhausted. I want to go to sleep now, but this child won't let me. I get those moments. But overall, if you can come from her perspective, I can remember my youngest child, she did not like to go to sleep. She just didn't. Kennedy, she loved her crib. You put her in the crib, she was home. She was in heaven. When we had to move her out of the crib into a bed, that was a nightmare. That's another story. But Selah, she did not like the crib. And so putting her, I'm remembering all the stories now. And Selah did not like to be, like Kennedy loved to be wound really tight with the blanket and held tight, like all bundled up and tight. And Selah was the opposite. But if I didn't do that, because she didn't like to go to sleep, she would scratch and, she just would, so I still wrap her tight. So I remember in our house, we had a sunroom in the back of our house. And I remember just holding her tight and she would just be straining to get free. And I would just hold her and I would just sing over her and put her to sleep every night. I don't know how many nights that was. And I would just sing over her and she would eventually fall asleep. Those are not fun moments, but yet they are. Because that right there, I get to watch her now 9 years later and I go, oh my gosh, I don't care if you're excited about it, but I'm really excited about what my 9-year-old's doing. So connect your pain to a joy somewhere. People do this, I don't like my job. Listen, you need to knock that attitude off. Connect that to a joy. You're doing this and it's actually allowing you to experience this. And so, yeah. So somehow connect the pain. Pain probably a little bit drastic. Connect the diaper changing to something joyful. Look for the little things. Let's go back to my own stories of Weaverville and the diaper changing years. I mean, there were just some people that's like, change your own diaper. I'm tired of changing your diaper. There were moments like that, but when they would have, someone had be tormented by just fear and just torment. And you'd be counseling them. And then you find out they had one good week or the one good night where they slept. That right there is like the mom and dad watching their baby take their first step. Celebrate that moment. And the very next night, they may be in torment again, but guess what? Now you have a joy. So now you're doing all this because of that. If you can keep those things connected, that works. It helps me. That makes sense?
Yeah,
Yep.
that makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Thank you.
Eric, this question is really more an administration question. I've always wondered when, public speakers or in our case, like, people like you, your dad, Chris, Randy Clark, how do you structure your year in advance? Like how I know that a lot of you are invited to conferences and that sort of thing. So you kind of know what's ahead of you.
Mhm.
When you're first starting to build, say, a company or a ministry or whatever, do you have like a personal assistant that sits down and says, this is kind of what you've got coming down the pipe? And what does that look like?
For years, well, for me, I know what you're asking. It's a huge loaded question. Yes, I do have a personal assistant. If I didn't have her, I'd be dead. That's one thing I know for sure. There are certain things that I don't have a desire to do and certain things that I'm not the best to do. And so those are typically the things that I get other people that are good at and love to do it, and they do it. So my assistant, when I hired her, I knew that she has strengths in these areas, and they were areas that I just didn't want to have to think about, worry about, or be responsible for as far as the day-to-day grind. And so those are areas I've handed off to her. As far as now, I know my example can be a little different because not everybody's going to be. I hope not everybody's trying to do what I'm doing. Honestly, there's a lot of the other world than this, so just make that really clear. But as far as what helped me decide what I do in a year, because my life revolves around Bethel and traveling, and obviously the family and all that. People ask, they invite you. Like, for example, I personally never invite myself anywhere. I don't. If you want to know, you guys want to know one pet peeve? I probably shouldn't put this on film. Probably no big deal. One pet peeve is when people invite themselves. Oh man, that bothers me. I have a nice smiley face, but inside I'm like, oh, you are so not coming here. That's what my mind says. So I have this thing of like imposing and inviting yourself. I'm like, oh boy, that just ask my team. They know that. So I have no desire to invite myself, and so I'm responding to invite. Now let's say I get more invites than my time allows. That's not fun. I hate it. I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do the second half of this year, and I'm having a really hard time because they all feel right, but I can't do them all. So it's like, oh God, would you just point out the ones I'm supposed to do? And so this is that grueling process that my wife and I, my assistant, and prayer, and we just go, where are we supposed to go? There are certain locations in the world that I have just committed to them as long as they want me to keep coming and investing in them. So I protected certain parts of the year where it's untouchable. So those are some of the things I've done. These are untouchable. Now I don't do this from a percentage standpoint. I just look back at it. This is about what it falls into. There's probably about 3 trips a year that are high. These are a location or people that I have extremely strong relationship with. Some places I've been going to for over 10 years now. And they told me, can you keep May open? They said that 10 years ago, and I've kept it open for them. And so every May I come, they invite me, so I just protect that.
Right.
Now, purely because it's high level of relationship there. Half of my travels are international. And so I naturally just have half of them are international. The rest of them are in the States. What I've noted, God seems to open doors to certain areas or regions. And sometimes, like for example, right now I'm probably going to be going to Texas anywhere from 2 to 5 times this year. And so right now it feels like that's what the highlight's on. You know, I went to Scandinavia, I think 4 times in 15 months or 18 months, something like that. So there are certain regions where the Lord highlights, I'm putting everything into that one. Nicaragua is another one. I protect every January. I protect that trip. That one is just, when the Lord told me about the mountain, I said, I'm here. I'm committed. So there are just certain things that help you make decisions. I don't know if this is what you're asking, but.
Yeah, because how do you make those decisions if you don't, put them before the Lord and ask for highlighting and that sort of thing? The other thing is, do you allow then, when you get home, do you sort of, set aside a couple of days that you can just kind of regroup, get together with your family? I don't know, are those, do you schedule that in or not?
No, I don't. But I always make up for it somehow. I don't always have the liberty to take 2 or 3 days off when I get home.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a price that we pay.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't violate the family. That helps. I don't do it like my family come. No, they're protected well by my decisions. Mm-hmm. But I don't always have the luxury to say when I can land. Sometimes I'll land next morning. I'm at it. I'm here or
Right.
whatever. And so I don't know how, but I'll make up for it somehow. Mm-hmm. My dad taught me a valuable lesson. He said, you'll pay a price because of who I am, but you also get very blessed because of who I am. So that right there, that's one of the best parenting advice. I didn't know it was the parenting advice, but now I do. Like, okay, so my family will definitely pay a price for who I am, but it's my responsibility to make sure they get blessed as a result of that price.
Right. And
so we do things. We have the ability to do extra things that bring it back home, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So it looks different than taking 2 or 3 days off right when I get off the plane,
Right.
but I'll make up for it somehow. And so because we fly so much, here's one example. Because we fly so much, I get so many miles, I get lots of free tickets. And so every summer we've made it a goal since the kids were young. Every summer we want to take them to another nation to experience culture, and because we're raising world changers.
Right.
Right outside their bedroom door, there's a map on the wall. We play these little games on the map, and so we're brainwashing them. That's what we're doing.
Right.
We're just little things like that. So every summer we are, 2 summers ago, we took them to Japan for 10 days. Talk about a different culture. I mean, I loved it.
Yeah.
Kids love traveling.
Right.
And then last summer we went to Iceland. This summer they're going to go to Mexico for 2 weeks to work at an orphanage. So every summer we're using, because I get the air miles.
Right.
By the time summer hits, I've got enough to take all 4 of us somewhere.
Right.
So the benefit like that help in the long run. Does that help a little bit?
It
That make
does.
sense?
Yes, because I think each of us, depending on what we're doing, even if it's in the secular world, if we're trying not to distinguish between those two, I know. So we do have to look at what are the important things for our time management. And so those things all answered those questions for me.
Yeah. My experience is purely in a ministry context.
Right.
I'm sure there's principle to take out, but the dynamic you'll experience starting a business will be largely different. That's just starting a business. That's going to be, I can't give you any input on that other than just trust God and bless you. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
I have 2 questions. The first one is there a way that you can invite feedback into your life? And if there is, like, how do you do that? And my second question is, just as students within this culture, are there ways that we can build that relationship that you were talking about, in ways that we can be sent from Bethel? And what does that look like, or what can we do now?
Somebody finally asked the question. I was thinking nobody's going to ask that. I'm impressed. As far as getting feedback, ask for it. Ask for it, and eventually become a culture that you don't have to ask for it.
Should
nobody
we be
got that, sorry.
specific?
People give you, I didn't ask for feedback. Well, we got a culture of feedback now, so you're going to get it anyway. So ask for it. I'm honestly ask for it, and ask for it from people that you value. We have such an optimistic attitude in this environment. How did I do that? You did amazing. And you're like, okay, listen, I get it. You know what I mean? So find people that'll really tell you the truth. I love sitting in the preaching classes. The feedback, that was the best sermon I've ever heard in my life. But I've heard there's been some really good feedback this year, so that's encouraging. But ask for it, and eventually you'll create a culture for it. If you experience, whenever I go through a confrontation or conflict, I usually ask for feedback afterwards. How did I handle myself in that moment? Did what I say was honoring but yet confrontative? And that's really, especially in areas like that, get feedback. Don't think you're amazing until you get some feedback. It's highly advised. Okay, as far as being sent out from Bethel, that's a really good question. I want to try to answer it by using an example. Do you think my dad and mom, Chris and Kathy, Danny and Sherry, Charlie and Julie, and there's other couple families that you guys, Bill and Judy Derryberry, and there's other ones that nobody really knows in this environment. Do you think they sat down 30 years ago and said, hey guys, let's do this because 30 years from now, a movement's going to be born? No, all they did was, hey, can you watch my kid tonight so my wife and I can go have a nice meal? Hey, can you come help me run this home group? Hey, you want to go to the lake on the weekend? What were they doing? They were living life together. And so I know there's another part of the question, how do I get sent out by Bethel? I get that piece, but honestly, if you get this piece, I've seen in however many years it's been, I've seen this happen. But it's because relationship was so valued, you begin to live life together. For example, in this room, some of you 30 years from now will be burning together, without a doubt. If not, large pockets of you will. And I believe that's been a huge heart of this house, is to see that this environment creates that right there. And then they actually live life together and out. And so we're seeing that increase dramatically. So I would encourage you to really focus on developing relationship and begin to live life and share life together. Because out of that, all these other things that you're asking about will happen. It just will. That makes sense? Okay. All right. That is it for the day. And so thank you guys again. And I'm going to hand it over.